Colour does not exist in the way that you think it does. Sure, there is a phenomenon that occurs when photons of various wavelengths reach the receptors at the back of your eye, but that phenomenon is nothing more than an elaborate illusion. Colour, like love or music, exists only in the mind of the being experiencing it, and, like love and music, the definition of colour is subject to change from being to being. Sure, we can assign arbitrary definitions to certain aspects of these things in an attempt to quantify them, but this is only falsely objective. You say that love is breakfast in bed. You say that music is a battle between treble and bass. And you say that yellow is light with a wavelength between 570 and 590 nanometers. But all you're doing is describing the experience of these things, without actually telling me what they are. It's true that there is a set of wavelengths out there that produce a colour in the human mind that most people would agree is called yellow. But the light itself is not yellow. It is light. It is without colour. So, if light doesn't have colour, then how is colour something that we're able to experience? Well, this is all thanks to 3 receptor cells called cones that we have in the backs of our eyes. In humans, these 3 cells are able to perceive wavelengths in ranges that are roughly equivalent to blue, green, and red, with varying degrees of success for various aspects of those ranges. But because our brains only have these 3 imperfect perception ranges to work with, that means that our ability to interpret the full spectrum of visible light is already destroyed. There are some reptiles that have 5 cone receptors. There are some reptiles that are experiencing more colours than you, colours that you cannot conceive. The fact that we only have these 3 cones to work with is part of the reason behind why we use 3 primary colours when creating a colour model. Although any 3 colours can technically be used as the basis for a colour model, experimentation will quickly show that some colour combinations are better than others. In additive colour models, where we are manipulating overlapping light beams, it is best to emulate the human eye, and so we use red, green, and blue as our primaries. This was the basis behind CRT monitors and TVs of old. In subtractive colour models, where we are mixing sources like pigments or dyes together, it used to be thought that we should use red, yellow, and blue as our primaries. However, while these combinations gave us brilliant oranges, they gave us rather dull greens and violets. Recent advances in colour theory suggest that we should instead be using cyan, magenta, and yellow. The only thing that keeps us teaching red, yellow, and blue is in fact the same thing that keeps people believing that Pluto is a planet: force of habit and an unwillingness to let go. But this trichromatic system of colour is only sensible to us because we have 3 receptors to interpret the light our eyes receive. If we had fewer, like most mammals, or more, like a number of reptiles, we would perceive colour entirely differently, seeing a smaller or greater number of colours depending. But it isn't just these cones that determine what colours we see. In fact, research that was concluded in 2004 has discovered the presence of a gene that allows people to distinguish between the unusually large varieties of the thing we call red. This gene, however, lies solely on the X chromosome, meaning that people with 2 X chromosomes theoretically have twice the number of this gene, and thusly are twice as good at perceiving the nuances in shades of red to those with an XY pairing. This is also thought to be the reason behind the fact that those with an XY pairing are significantly more likely to be red-green colorblind, as if this gene is defective, there's no fail-safe. On the topic of things that have come to light relatively recently, modern colour scientists do not divide the visible light spectrum, or rainbow, into 7 colours. Instead, they use 6 as, according to Asimov anyway, it has never seemed that indigo is worth the distinction of being considered a separate colour. To his eyes, it always seemed a deep blue. And this may, according to better interpretations of Newton's works, have been what Newton intended. as what he called blue is what we would call cyan, and what he called indigo is better known as blue. Due to this perceived redundancy and the inability of the human eye to distinguish readily between different shades of blue, scientists have now done away with the indigo distinction altogether. Finally, I'd like to address a video that has been going around the internet for some time now. One that claims that pink does not exist. Of course, the first thing I need to say about this video is that the colour they are referring to is magenta. But without being too pedantic, obviously in the sense of any colour existing, magenta is a thing. We can perceive it, equally as validly as we can perceive red, or green, or blue. So why then do these people claim that magenta does not exist? Well, what they may mean is that magenta does not exist as a single wavelength of light. If you look on the visible spectrum, you'll find that every colour you can think of, but none of the varieties of magenta. But why then can we see it? Well, as I earlier explained, our cones can only really detect different wavelengths of red, green, and blue. The other colours that we experience are made up of our brain receiving different amounts of the red light, blue light, and green light. When our brain receives two signals that overlap in a sensible way, for example, a little bit of green and a bit of red, it gives us the colour that actually lives in that region on the spectrum, in this case, yellow. But when our brain receives two signals that don't lie near each other, it doesn't know what to do. Blue and red can't really be overlaid like blue and green, or green and red. And so, with this seemingly illogical information, our brain produces magenta. Of course, this is just a trick of the brain. And so, in a way, those videos are right. Magenta doesn't exist. But then, given that all chroma is just a trick of our brains, neither does any other colour. I'm Mathematicus, and thank you for watching.